I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part of the recording. Indigo Shire Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land which now comprises the municipality of Indigo Shire. We pay respect to their elders past and present, celebrate and respect their continuing culture and acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and abilities and judgment. Do we have any apologies and leave of absence? We've got Councillor Tysell, who's away.
Mr. Mayor, Director Mark Florence is absent. He's ill today.
Thank you. Item 4, declaration of conflict of interest. No. We now have open forum. We've received a number of items for open forum, and the first person I'd like to invite to the rostrum, Jeff Palmer.
Sorry. Is that working now? Ah, yes, okay. My first question is, having looked over the budget, and my two questions do concern the budget. And so my first question is, will Council outline to ratepayers any changes it proposes making to the existing arrangements to ensure that this 22-23 budget is actually delivered? The reason for my question is that Council really has a history of non-delivery on its budgets. It has not done so since, I think, 2014-15, and the performance is getting increasingly worse. And I'm sure councillors are saying, why is this so? And I think the first question, if you ask that, the first thing to think about if you ask that question is the budget right? My second question...
With the first question, I'll refer it to the CEO.
Sorry?
I'll refer your first question to the CEO.
So thanks for the question, Jeff. So the organisation is satisfied that it has the resources in place to deliver the budget. So the budget includes a range of services. It also includes a range of capital programs.
Microphone? I can't hear you.
The budget includes a range of services, a range of council plan action items, as well as a capital program, and we're satisfied that we've got the resources in place to deliver on the capital program, on the budget, and on the council plan. So in years gone by, we've delivered most of the capital projects, if that's what you're referring to. And where they're not delivered, it's not usually due to staff resources, it's usually due to other complications with the projects themselves, which often require a little extra time. So resource-wise, there's ample, we believe, we've got the organisation available to deliver on the budget.
Okay, question 2.
Yeah, it's just that, I mean, this month, if you look at page 154, you're 56% to budget. 56% to budget. You won't even get to 65%. And every month we come along here and we hear how well we're doing. It's just beyond me. A second question relates to that very matter, and that is the management of the budget, which is managed through the Capital Works Monitor. And I would just say that when council is missing budget by so much, and we continually hear how well the Capital Works budget is being managed, and it falls short by 40%, then if the budget's right, there must be something wrong with the management and the reporting. And so my question, the Capital Works Monitor is something like 100 lines. It's 23 columns in width I don't know that many people can read it. I've tried with a magnifying glass. I've even had the Excel originals delivered to me. It's just an unworkable document. And the fact that we're not achieving budget, and that worse, councillors are not aware of the extent to which we're not, to wit, the constant comments about how well we're doing, it's just a misnomer. And so I would say the existing monthly reporting.
What's the question, Jeff? I'm just reading it. Well, the question's 2 lines.
Will Council review the existing monthly reporting of the progressive implementation of the Capital Works budget through the Capital Works Monitor to ensure it is appropriate and fit for purpose? 23 columns where not one column mentions the budget. Not one. Not one word of the budget in any of the columns. What are you, I don't know what you're managing. And it would seem
the CEO will answer the question, please.
Thanks for those questions, Mr. Palmer. I think you'll find that this council's reports to the community are very detailed. And I think agreeing with you, there's 23 columns, I haven't added them up, just tells me that we're sharing a lot of information with you. I'm sorry that it's small, but we do try to look after the Excel reports themselves so you can expand them and have a look at them. So we try to provide as much information as possible, but I've got your email from earlier this week, and I think the Mayor's already said we're happy to meet with you to go through it line by line if you like, Jeff, and happy to do that to get your views on how we can improve it. So I'm certainly happy to keep it as best it can be. If you've got some ideas to share with us, I'd be happy to hear them. Obviously not here today, but we've got a lot of information in them. I think we analyse them, we cut and slice and dice it in all different ways. So if there's anything else we can provide you that helps you, I'm happy to look at that.
So Councillor Goldsworth.
I'd just point out that the spreadsheet that lists the capital works and where they're at is available online. You can get it as a separate document and you can zoom into that as much as you need to. Secondly, we'll see in the 10.1, the monthly finance reports for May, there's a 78.8% completion rate, not the figure that you detailed, and that's for May, and we still haven't finished with June.
Sorry?
The present year. This year, 78%, 76%.
Not to budget, to your Q2, whatever that is. Anyway. To Q2 you might be, but to budget, the budget is 16 million, 16.4 million, and month to date, you're at $9 million. You don't have to be Einstein to work out what that is. All you have to do is look at page 154 of your agenda.
Thanks, Jeff. The next question is from Herb Alabok, and Herb is happy for me to read the question. Is that correct? Yep. So question 1 is regarding item 10.4, adoption Indigo Shire Council 22-23 budget. In the 2 tables under section 4.5.1 summary on page 321 of the council agenda, the budgeted expenditure for 22-23 is 9.279 million for infrastructure and 16.798 million in total. The table under section 4.5.2 current budget on page 331 of the council agenda, the total amounts are 11.37 million for infrastructure and 18.880 million for total capital works. The respective differences between the values on page 321 and the totals on page 331 are 2.091 million for infrastructure and 2.082 million for total capital works. Can you please explain these differences?
Mr. McGreg's on the meeting, he's going to explain that for us.
Thanks. Director Pinkerton.
Yeah, thanks, Herb, for the question. After hearing the community submissions a couple of weeks ago, we made some late adjustments to the capital works table to improve the way we displayed that information. Unfortunately, when we made these changes, two of the totals at the bottom that you've pointed out didn't update correctly. So page 39 should show a total of 9.279 million for total infrastructure and 16.798 million for total capital works. All of the project values in the table above this is correct, and the overall budget allocation hasn't changed. It's a drafting error, and we'll correct that in the final published budget and make sure that's correct. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. Question 2. Regarding item 10.4, adoption Indigo Shire Council 2022-23 budget, funding of the Beechworth to Yakananda Rail Trail. In the May Capital Works report under Council Agenda item 12.4 on page 321 of the Council Agenda, the subtotal and overall budget line for the Beechworth to Yakananda Rail Trail shows 5.554148 under the heading of total expenditure to date, and 4.461 million under the heading of total income to date, a differential of 1.093 million, which is the council, that is ratepayer funds expended on the project to date. In the Capital Works budget on page 329 of the Council Agenda, the project description for the Beechworth to Yakananda Rail Trail states grant funding of 5.2 million, and council funds of 1.75 million, and actual income to date 4.604 million. The budgeted expenditure 22-23 for the project is 1.451 million. Therefore, the difference between the budgeted expenditure and the outstanding grant funds is $712,000. The amount which will be funded from council cash, ratepayers funds, making the total contributions from council ratepayers funds 1.805 million. Is that to be answered by Director Pinkerton? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. From what I can see in the question, it's a fairly complex question, but from what I can see, it looks like the numbers that are quoted have missed accounting for the carry forward amount that's shown in this month's Capital Works report. It's a bit complex to explain verbally, so I'll take that on notice and I'll provide a written response to you after the meeting.
Thank you. The next question from Robin McLeish.
Again, have we? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and the councillors. At the February council meeting, I asked if council would initiate contacts with the relevant authorities to introduce 40-kilometre speed limits in all of the Shire's CBDs. The infrastructure director stated that he would refer the question to the Traffic Liaison Council, which meets quarterly, and other agencies. 4 months have now passed with no information. What is the current situation on the introduction of 40-kilometre speed limits in the Shire's CBDs?
The Director, Infrastructure, Ian Allett.
Thank you. Hi, Robin. Thanks for your question. Look, there was a Traffic Liaison Committee meeting, I can't remember the date, but I'd say around 2 weeks ago. I know this matter was tabled at that forum. So my understanding is there was support from that group. So it's got to go through a little bit of process with Vic Roads and the like. I'd need to chase up with the officers to understand exactly where it's at, and we can communicate that back to you.
When do you expect that to take place?
Well, look, I can chase that up in the next. I can chase that up, Robin, in the next couple of days. Certainly, the meeting has taken place, and I can get the outcomes of that meeting. But there's a bit more process. It doesn't result in going out and changing speed limits over. There's a process through Vic Roads that needs to be followed. So yeah, that process has changed a little bit. I'm not across the detail, but we can come back to you within days.
Thank you. On my second question, In a recent Indigo Weekly, the CEO stated that the Indigo Shire and all other Victorian councils use the same template for budget papers. But it can be, and this is his statement, it can be difficult to decipher carry forwards and grant funding. Council's previous budgets provided a capital works program with two separate tables, the first of which listed the new projects that are required to be approved by the councillors, and the second table listed the previously approved carryover projects. There was no confusion. It was a very good form of presentation. The capital works program in this budget is not fit for purpose, with only one table with both the new and the approved carryover projects mixed together. Has the capital works program with the new format been prepared using the template for Victorian councils? And if so, what are the benefits that it provides? Have the councillors been briefed on the changes? And will councillors be required to approve this capital works program, which lacks a specific list of new projects?
CEO.
Thanks, Robin, for that question. Yes, the standard template, I must say, is very simple, and this council is attempted to provide more information than the standard. I might refer you, I'm just going to show you this page. This is the City of Melbourne. So that's their capital budget. It fits on half a page, and it spends $240 million on half a page. That's the information you get from City of Melbourne. I've gone through a whole range of other councils and I've got the same information. Our template provides far more information, details of all the projects, line by line. It goes for some 10 or 12 pages compared to half a page to a big city council. It's got more columns. So what we've tried to do is to provide the whole story in one place. I do recognise that some other councils do split those two tables out. We have combined the two, the benefit being that you can see the whole project, the whole amount expended this year, the whole amount budgeted this year, and the whole amount carried forward from prior years, all in the same line. So we've tried to make it clearer. I understand it's a bit different than the past. And but hopefully it provides the whole story in one place with far more information than the standard template provides. So again, I'm happy to meet with you, Robin, to see if we can, if you've got suggestions. I know you've got a different way you want to look at it. I know Herb wants to look at it a different way. I know Jeff Palmer wants to look at it a different way. Everyone's going through these and have got different views on them. So I'm happy to get your feedback to see if we can show them more in a different way. Happy to hear what they are. So we're not trying to hide anything. We're trying to give as much information as possible. And so I'm happy to try and tidy that up. I think it shows everything that and more than standard template in other councils. So I'm comfortable with that aspect of it. If it's come across as too confusing, then I'd love to hear different ways to improve it for next time.
I think you're confused with presenting information and clarity of information. Out of interest, Alpine Shire, Tarwong Shire, Queenscliff Borough Shire, all presented their capital works program with the same format as we had previously. I see no reason to change, and we should go back to it.
Thanks, Robin. There's also a question from Alan Pleitner, who I notice is not here, and it would normally be read if we did not have a gallery, but we do have a gallery. So the CEO will write a response direct to Alan Pleitner. I'd now like to go on to item number 6, which is community and council achievements. I'd like to stand forward John Hennessy and Iris Manick. Just stand there near the rostrum. Iris Manick has been awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia in the 2022 Queen's Birthday Honours List for service to the community of Beechworth. The council would like to congratulate you on that effort. And you're welcome to say a few words into that microphone with the light on if you'd like to. Well, I'd like to say that not just keep Australia beautiful, but you really put Beechworth on the map with Tidy Towns, and Tidy Towns is Australian wide, and You and your team, you certainly had a couple of very good helpers, but you were the leader. You were always the leader, and what you've achieved, and you've achieved through Lions and many other boomerang bags. Everybody knows Oris Manic, and we'd just like to congratulate you. You are very famous. Thanks a lot. Next, John Hennessy, who received the Emergency Services Medal in the 2020 Queen's Birthday Honours List in recognition of his service to Victoria State Emergency Services. It's a couple of years ago, but because of COVID, this was an opportunity for us to congratulate you as well on that massive achievement. If you'd like to say a few words into the microphone. Into the microphone. The microphone.
In all truth and honesty, I would really like to thank the Mayor and the councillors for acknowledging the recent award of my ESM. I could say more, but I would just like to give a little bit of history very quickly. I know that you're important and busy people, and instead of having 2,000 pages, you've got less than 1,000 pages to be on top of tonight. So I will be as brief as I can. Way back, I moved to Rutherglen. I needed to be part of the community. I had two choices: football or the CFA. I don't understand this football coming from New South Wales. There's only one sort of football, and that's played by the gods, and that's rugby. So the end of that was a long time ago, last century, I joined the SES. The best move I ever made. I've made great friends. We've done some good things. I'm very much reminded of my father's words when he came back as a prisoner of war from the Japanese. And it stuck with me for a long time. He said, the survivors were those who worked cooperatively together for the greater good. And I look at, where am I today? In a sense, I'm just a volunteer, an SES, actually I've retired, a volunteer, one of many in Beechworth. And I look at those marvellous people. These are people who have given their time, their skills, their knowledge, all for the greater good. And I think that's fantastic. And I guess from a council perspective, I really ask possibly two things. One, that we acknowledge all those volunteers, be they the service clubs, the sporting clubs, the CFA and so on, to recognise their worth and their value. Because the other thing, I guess, where we're really trying to head for is to have a resilient community. When, I'll be blunt, when the shit happens, we need a community where everyone knows what to do, who does it, where it is, and so on. Because inevitably with climate change, shit is going to happen. We're a bit lucky, maybe we're on the top of the hill, maybe we won't get a big flood. So in simple terms, I just thank you ever so much for acknowledging my award and being indulgent enough for me to go on a bit more than I should have. So I thank you all.
I'd also like to recognise your wife, Joan Sims, who is also an OAM. On Australia Day, Helen McIntosh also received a Medal of the Order of Australia, and she was recognised at the citizenship ceremony, in which Helen Haynes spoke. So I'd just like to mention her as well. So well done to both of you. You're outstanding citizens of Indigo Shire. Item number 7, condolences. Yes, if you'd like to leave, you don't have to wait for the next three hours while we go through this agenda. Thank you. Item number 8, which is confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. The recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on 17 May 2022 and the additional council meeting held on 14 June 2022 as published in the council website be confirmed. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Cratchit. Did you just put Jen? Seconded by Councillor Price. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 8.1, is there any business arising from those minutes? Item 8, are there any petitions presented? Item 10.1, the May Finance Report, the recommendation that Council accepts the year-to-date May Finance Report, noting the progress against Council's Q2 forecast. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Croucher. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Yes, I just make the observation that yes, the capital works are coming along there. We're still in a good financial position. We've got plenty of money in the bank. Our completion rate on capital works may not be as high as we may like, but when you compare it to this time last year where we'd completed, let's see, was it year-to-date actuals this time last year was 8 million, just over. This year it's 9.2. And the completion rate last year was 75% at this time of year, and it's 78.8%. So given the conditions, COVID and everything else, we're in a good spot and keep doing the good work.
Thank you. Councillor Croucher.
I'd just like to endorse what Councillor Goldsworthy said. At the end of May, the financial position is still favourable to the Q2 forecast.
I've just got a question for the Director of Planning and Corporate Services. On page 15 of the report, it shows that the budget forecast was 15 million and the actual cash report is 16 million. To tell me why there's the differentiation of $1 million.
Yeah, of course, the that difference is a bit over that actually, and it's through two things primarily. One is the early receipt of the federal assistance grant, so they normally pay us 50% upfront, and this year we've received 75% upfront. And the second thing is just that last bit of capital works money that we're forecast for the last bit of the financial year. Both of those are timing variances, and so they'll work themselves out over the next few months.
Thank you, Director Pinkerton. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.2, the council plan. The recommendation is the council adopt the updated council plan 21-25 with the following amendments. A new action 2.1/9 commences stage 1 of the master plan for council owned land in Chiltern in the Anderson Road precinct. Phasing adjustment 2.3.5, develop a public toilets improvement strategy, including the year 22-23. And the next phasing adjustment is review council's revenue and rating strategy, including the year 22-23. Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Price. Councillor Goldsworthy.
From our council plan, we develop our budget. As we know, tonight we're looking to adopt the budget. It's incumbent on us to finance the council plan appropriately. The first dot point in relation to the council-owned land in Chiltern, it's a significant purchase that was made in the recent past, and it provides a significant opportunity for the Chiltern area and the Indigo Shire, depending on how that is utilised, and we understand that we need to go through a master planning process for that. The other two, I'll express a little bit of disappointment because ordinarily they should have been dealt with for this financial year. We haven't been able to get there. We do get a lot of commentary around the public toilets and the need to improve them. And so this is how we would go about that and recognising what needs to be done, when and where and how much. And same for the revenue and rating strategy, very important for the income of the Shire and how we explain it to the ratepayers as to why we're taking their hard-earned and what we do with it.
Councillor Price.
I would only add that it's been a public exhibition and there were no submissions, and just for the benefit of those that have read the agenda, we note the spelling mistake that we need to rectify.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Just before I carry the motion, I'd just like to mention that that item 1 there, the master plan for the council-owned land in Chiltern, the CEO and I were up in Canberra, and we were fortunate to have a face-to-face meeting with the new Federal Minister for Local Government and Regional Development, in which we raised the council land issue, and it was very warmly received, and we'd be hoping for federal assistance in the development of that land. If nobody's against the motion, carried. Item 10.3, consideration of the 22-23 budget submission. Recommendation is the council receives the attached budget submission and thanks the submitters for their assistance with the budget process. Endorses the management response detailed in this report in relation to the budget submission. 3, makes the recommended changes to the budget as a result of the submissions. And 4, directs council staff to respond to each submitter with a copy of this report and the council resolution. Somebody like to move that? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Croucher. Councillor Goldsworthy.
That third dot point in particular, I know we've got a number of the submitters in the room at the moment, and if you've been able to have a look at the updated budget, your submissions did come into account. So we've improved our reporting on the capital works, so you'll see the actual income and expenditure for multi-year projects now, and also the Chiltern land project. You'll see that that's firmly mentioned against borrowings, so there's no confusion there. A number of other changes. Well, the formulation of the budget was actually made from a lot of the submissions that were made early in the piece and the surveys. So in all, the processes worked really well, where we've developed a budget that supports our council plan and acknowledges the submissions that were made.
So, Councillor Croucher.
In this report, Council have adequately considered the views of the community. By placing the submissions into themes, constituents can now see the additions and changes made. I'd like to congratulate the staff on the work they have done in producing a report that explains in layman's terms of the actions arising from the consideration of the budget submissions.
Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Shepherd.
I also wanted to thank Mel Collis and her team on this engagement. I think it's probably the best engagement we've done since I've been on council, and the fact that 311 people put in their ideas before we even started the process, I think meant we only had a few people at the end of the process who still had things to say because their ideas had been included in the budget itself. So thanks to Mel, and thank you to all those members of the community, 311 and probably more, who did at the beginning give us feedback on what they thought, and that's the themes that, of course, we've got here. So thank you to both sections of the community and our staff.
Councillor Horn.
Yes, I too would like to talk about the pre-budget surveys. I think that was a very good move in demystifying the processes that we go into with considering the budget and giving people the opportunity to have a word at the beginning of the process rather than at the end, when, let's face it, there's very little wiggle room. I think we also need to have some other issues amended and take a great deal of notice. And obviously we can learn a lot of lessons as we go through, but it's a good start.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Oh, sorry. Is anybody against the motion?
I am.
All right. All those in favour of the motion? Councillor Price, Shepherd, Goldsworthy, Gaffney, Croucher. Against? Councillor Horn. Okay. Carried. Item 10.4, adoption of the Indigo Shire Council 2022-2023 budget. The recommendation, 1, that council, having given public notice and having received and considered submission, adopts the attached budget, including the budgeted financial statements as defined by the Local Government Financial Reporting Regulations 2014 for 2022-23. The recommendation is quite long and goes for well over 2 pages. It includes the declaration of rates and charges, the general rates, the municipal charge, waste management charges, payment options, consequential, and at item 8, borrowings. The borrowings. Council proposes $1 million of borrowings for 22-23 relating to Chiltern land purchases completed in 2021-22, development planning project 22-23 and beyond. And 8.2, in accordance with the requirements of section 104 of the Local Government Act 2020, sufficient financial capability has been included in the 2022-23 budget and the associated 10-year plan to meet existing repayment options. Would somebody like to move the budget? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy. Seconder, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy.
Once again, we've gone through a significant process to develop a budget that delivers to the community. Some of the project initiatives which are listed on page 37, it's the Chiltern Community Hub, which we hope to complete in this coming year. $2 million, the art strategy, recreation plan for implementation, the Rutherglen placemaking, our roads, the caravan master plan, and Shire-wide annual resealing. That's significant. There's, let's see, we've got looking to maintain a cash reserve of $5.2 million. And basically it'll deliver a 1.75% rate increase to total the rates at $18.7 million, total income of 37. So we receive a bit under half in rates and we rely on grants and fees for the rest. A total expenditure will be 36 million, a total capital works program of 16.7 and 7.7 on new projects. So once again, we're looking to deliver for the community a significant capital works program. We can only hope that a significant portion of that is completed.
Councillor Shepherd.
I'll just reiterate that I think the process in the council plan and then the budget, the community involvement in both of those has led to a community-owned budget, a community-owned council plan. I'm very proud of what most of these areas that are listed, we've had a fair bit of input into and the community's had a lot to say about it. And I feel that this reflects very much the community and the council's priorities for the Shire. I know there's some people that have concerns about some like spending money on rail trails or spending, but I think as far as we've noted, most of the community is very supportive of how we're spending our money and how we're creating an amazing Shire to live.
Would anybody else like to speak to the budget? Councillor Horn.
When we traditionally have only received 3 or 4 submissions to the budget, and we've had so many submissions, 18 submissions, I think that's pretty indicative that people aren't really happy, and there's a lot more work to be done.
Would anybody else like to speak to the budget? Councillor Price.
I too, I'm very confident in the process that we've been through. It's a process that we interrogate each year, and that we make sure that we fully engage with, and we insist on improving that process year on year. And we're able to do that because we have good staff creating good outcomes, good documents, and they're really happy to receive good constructive feedback. So I'm very pleased with this budget. I was even more pleased to see that all of the councillors at the Finance Committee meeting endorsed the budget last week. I think it's a really good position to be in, that we have such confidence in this document, and I thank all the staff that put it together.
Would anybody else like to speak to the budget? All right. I just wanted to ask a question which can either be answered by the Director of Planning and Corporate Services or the CEO about the importance of having 5.2 million in reserve.
Mr. Mayor, I could have a go at that, but I will throw it to our Director of Corporate Services. This is his budget that he oversees. So I'll ask Greg to answer that one, but I could have a go at it.
Sorry, I thought you were having to go first. It is important to have that that balance in reserve, and we always budget for that to be our minimum cash level. And I was just flicking through to find the page, but there is a mention of that figure in the long-term financial plan document, and it's worth having a look at. And it goes into how we build up that minimum, and it's designed to make sure that the council has always got sufficient cash reserves to pay its debts, even on a bad year with events going on and a little bit in reserve. So it's our safety net just to make sure that things are going to continue on regardless of what happens.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsworthy.
I would like to acknowledge the work that the staff have done, particularly Phil Garoni, in building this budget, actively overseen by Greg and the CEO. Phil does a mountain of work around this time of year and is to be applauded for it. For a very small department, his output is significant.
That was your summing up, Councillor? Yep. Is anybody against the motion? All those in favour of the motion, raise your hand. Councillor Price, Councillor Shepherd, Councillor Goldsworthy, Councillor Gaffney, Councillor Croucher. Against? Councillor Horn. Carried. Item 10.5, planning permit for 342 Railway Access Road, Chiltern. The recommendation is that council approves application PP 210275 for use and development of land at 324 Railway Access Road, Chiltern, for landscape, gardening supplies and trade supplies, caretakers dwelling and signage, be issued subject to conditions included in attachment 3, and issues the notice of decision to approve the permit. Somebody like moved by Councillor Price, second by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price.
The proposal, as it says in the document, is use and development of the land for landscape, gardening supplies and trade supplies, caretakers dwelling and signage. I'm satisfied that all of the required information is within the report, and councillors were also offered a site visit so that they could get an idea of where this planning application would be and ask the questions of the planner, and we were all satisfied with that on the day. So I'm happy to move that.
Okay, Councillor Shepherd.
Yes, I'm happy to second that motion, and I think it's great news. I think the whole time I've been on council, there's been discussion about where this landscape business is going to go, and so it's great that it's found a home. I see there were 2 submissions against it, but it's quite well argued why those submissions don't hold up here. So congratulations on this being hopefully approved.
I think one of those objectives is in Melbourne. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Croucher.
Look, the good thing about these things is having the opportunity to actually go and visit the site, which I did, and we were well and truly versed by our planning manager of the pros and cons and bits and pieces that take place. And the number of conditions have been spelt out. And so reading the report, I'm more than happy to also recommend.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 10.6. The recommendation is that a permit be issued for the use and development of a medical centre and for residential aged care for the alteration of access to the transport zone, for the removal of native vegetation and for the display of signage. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price. Second, Councillor Horn. Councillor Price.
On the same day as we made the site visit to the previous planning permit application on Railway Access Road, councillors also visited the site of this proposal. Again, we were really made aware of all of the different challenges of the site and exactly how they've been incorporated into the design, including the most recent flooding event and how that has been incorporated into this design. I'm really satisfied that it is well connected to the area around it, and it's appropriate in that sense. And I'm really satisfied with the way that it's being linked to the town. I think this is a really exciting proposal for Rutherglen, and I'm really pleased for our planning department to be able to handle this application, and very confident in the planner. So happy to move this motion.
Councillor Horn.
Yes, this is indeed a very exciting time for the township of Rutherglen, and all of these planning approvals and considerations are really important, particularly as mentioned previously about the flooding situation. There's been lots of people talk about that, and it's nice to have the confidence to carry forward with it.
Councillor Croucher.
Yeah, it was a detailed report that fits neatly with the planning scheme and then certainly be a great asset for Rutherglen and surrounding areas.
Would anybody else like? Councillor Goldsworthy.
Just to say that it's the most significant planning application that we've had to deal with. It's probably the largest build in our shire since maybe the Beechworth prison was built, which should be more than 20 years ago. This will be significant for not only the township of Rutherglen, but the broader community. There will be a lot of jobs in construction out there, and then there will be a place that a state-of-the-art facility where those that need those services will be comfortable, and it'll be a very significant community asset into the future.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I think you've all spoken. No, Councillor Shepherd.
When we were given a presentation on this aged care residence, I was impressed with any question I asked about the pandemic or how they had changed their design to suit current conditions. They were very competent and aware of all the conditions and concerns that I had. And I'm really confident this is going to be, as you said, state-of-the-art and a great asset. And also the fact that there's a medical centre with 6 medical practitioners and a cafe attached, I think is also an added bonus. So, yeah, look forward to seeing this built.
Is anybody against the motion? I'd just like to say that prior to this grant, the CEO and I met with the CEO of Indigo North Health, We've certainly met with him since, and it's not just good for Rutherglen, but it's also good for the Indigo North Health catchment area. So if nobody's against, carried. (10.7) regarding local laws 2 and local laws 4. Before I put the recommendation, Director Pinkerton.
Yeah, thank you. As mentioned in the report, we've been waiting for the final certification of the local laws, which is a step that's required under the new Local Government Act. And we've received that certification. It came in late last week after the agenda was published. The certification documents have been circulated to councillors separately over the weekend, and I'm formally tabling the 2 certifications for the 2 local laws tonight. And these certification documents will be included in the meeting minutes. As part of the, sorry, I should back up, the certification says that the local laws meet all of the requirements, and that council is clear to consider that tonight. As part of the legal review, the lawyer has made some minor administrative suggestions that help to clarify the wording. No change to the operation of the local laws, just some typos. So I'd therefore like to change the 3rd bullet point of the recommended resolution to say that council adopts the attached local law 2 amenity and local law 4 control of livestock local laws, subject to the following changes. A, the word "and" is added at the end of clause 17.1.6. B, clause 17.1.7 is replaced with, and then in quotes, is compliant with all relevant acts and regulations, in quotes. And C, clause 17.1.8 is renumbered to become 17.2. The other parts of the recommended resolution are the same, and I've circulated this amended recommendation in the last couple of days for councillors' consideration. Thank you.
The recommendation is that council notes the submissions made to the review of local law 2 and thanks all submitters over the review process for their consideration and suggestion. 2, receives the legal certification for local law 2 and local law 4 as required by section 74 of the Local Government Act 2020. Item 3, as per described and sent out by Director Pinkerton to all councillors. 4, authorises the CEO to make any final cosmetic changes to the documents and perform any additional administrative processes that are required to complete the process. And authorises the CEO to sign and seal local law 2 and local law 4. Somebody would like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Croucher. Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Croucher.
Yes, well, the local laws 2 and 4 have been through a very rigorous process of community consultation, submissions, plus an absolute mammoth amount of work from the staff. As a result of these changes which have been made, plus including the ones that you made, Greg Pinkerton, and the add-ons which will in fact improve the laws and serve our communities well into the future.
Councillor Shepherd.
There were a number of, this has gone out for public review, but there were previous, when the first one went, in the early stages, there were submitters and we thank them for their input. But when this went out as a document just recently, there was one submission that came in, which was quite sensible around, that meant that we changed the meaning of township so that they could ride their horse on the verges outside of town. So again, it's really important that people read these local laws and so that we can change them so that we're not doing ridiculous things like stopping people from riding out of the town because of the wording. So thank you for that person, and hopefully we'll see you riding along the verges of the roads.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.1. The recommendation is the council adopts the Barmouth Park Master Plan June 2022, which incorporates feedback from a community consultation process undertaken throughout March 2022. Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, second by Councillor Price. Councillor Goldsworthy.
The significance of a master plan for anything that we do can't be underestimated. Quite often, once adopted and in conjunction with other strategic plans from the council, we're able to apply for funding, and it goes to our success rate that we do these things fairly well. What I'd note out of the master plan is 7 requests. Some of these have already actually been completed or close to it. They will be undertaken. So floodlight upgrades, the cricket training nets certainly on the agenda, female change room review and configuration options, protective safety netting behind the goals, electronic scoreboard, which has been completed, tennis club room development to go with the new tennis courts out there, and sport field drainage and irrigation upgrades. So hopefully with this, an adoption of the master plan, it'll be successful in trying to achieve those aims.
Councillor Price.
As Councillor Goldsworthy said, that we're really happy to support master plans because they feed into our into how we build our strategic documents. We can take the next priority projects out of the master plans that we have and feed them into the different grant funding. It gives really clear line of sight for what the priorities are of the council and of these user groups and this committee of management. And it's really great to see quite a list of priorities for such a significant asset in Beechworth.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.2, the recommendation is the council recognises the value of Indigo Shire's senior citizen clubs in supporting the ageing community. 2, receives the Senior Citizens Clubs and Centres Future Direction Report 2021 and endorses the recommendations presented in Table 2. And 3, acknowledges the financial matters as discussed in the report and notes the $5,000 allocation in the 2022-23 budget for a new booking system. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Croucher, seconder, Councillor Price. Councillor Croucher.
Having been involved in the senior cits clubs throughout the Shire and being a senior citizen myself, I certainly value the work that the clubs do in keeping our seniors engaged. I endorse the recommendations made in Table 2 and acknowledge the financial matters discussed in the report.
Councillor Price. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.3, the recommendation the council receives the report of 2021-2022 swimming pool season. Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy.
The aim of the report is to give us some context around how the pools are being utilised and potentially what we could be doing better with them. I note that there are significant variations in the operating hours between the 5 pools, and I would encourage the CEO to try and gauge what the community desires going forward from here as to whether there's still appropriate times to be open or whether they're looking for a change in hours. Overall, the pools do come at a significant cost. It's I think it's the first year for their operation under a new operator for us, and at this stage, Belgravia Leisure have been doing an okay job, and we hope to see an improvement into the future.
Councillor Shepherd.
From my perspective as a councillor this year, it's probably the most complaints I've ever had around the swimming pool access. From the Yakandana perspective, it was closed a great deal, and people would ring me asking me when why wasn't there a sign, or why didn't they know it wasn't going to be open? So it didn't work that well. This report goes through the issues. Part of the thing is I see a Victorian-wide, or is it Australian-wide, need for lifesavers and staff. But I really want to see a big improvement for next year. And as you said, Councillor Goldsworthy, it does say in this report that the community will be consulted about what times will suit them better. So I'm hoping that the smaller Chiltern and Yakandanda that seem to get a raw deal this year, certainly that their times improve next year, and that the community is able to use the pool. I understand it's a great cost to us, and I understand it was a difficult year, but if they're going to be open, if they're going to be there, they've got to be open, they've got to have community access. I know a lot of people are going to Wodonga if they can't work out what times the Chiltern and Yak pools are open. So yeah, I'm looking for an improvement. If we can get one, that'd be great.
Councillor Price.
Yeah, I'd echo some of the comments already made. Certainly there was a lot of feedback this pool season about closures, and mostly that they were unexpected. So people were arriving and not aware that the pool had been closed. We really understand that this is a really reputational sort of a service for us. It's a really high value service within the community, and we pay a lot of attention to it. And we did that across the course of the season, and we really wanted to see that that was reflected in this report, and I think it has been. I'd also note that at the start of the year, when some of these closures were occurring, was when we were just starting to talk about the lack of staff availability across a number of areas, and this is certainly one of them. So we're not looking for excuses, but we've certainly been talking about all of the different contributing factors, and we will definitely be looking for an improvement to this service on this year.
Would Councillor Croucher?
Very short and sweet. I'd just like to acknowledge the problems our swimming pools endured last summer, and in particular, the problems regarding staff. And I look forward to the ambitious plans Belgravia Leisure have to improve service delivery and user experiences.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Goldsworthy. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.4, local sport infrastructure grants. The recommendation is the council endorses the following projects for submission to the 2022 Local Sports Infrastructure Fund. Tangambalanga Active Park Pump Track, total cost $300,000. Waganya Railway Land Pump Track, total cost $300,000. With both of those, Sport and Rec Victoria made a grant of $150,000 with council's contribution at $150,000. Barmutha Park lighting upgrade, total cost $300,000. SRV grant $225,000, council contribution $60,000, club contribution $15,000. Butson Park club rooms planning, total project cost $60,000, SRV grant $30,000, council contribution $25,000, club contribution $5,000. And 2, endorses a council financial contribution to each project for the 2023-24 budget should any of the projects receive government funding. Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Goldsworthy. Councillor Price.
It's a real testament to our staff to be able to continuously put up some of these applications for grants. We have a very high strike rate with these sorts of grants. Just for an example, when we've talked about our master plan just 2 items back, and our active Indigo strategy, which will be referenced in a later item, we have really great documents that build our priorities, and so it's very easy to then identify exactly what the next round of priorities are and fit them into the criteria required. Normally, this grant round is annually, and we know exactly when that timeline is, and so we're able to build into that cycle. But my thanks go to the staff in particular this year, because in stark contrast, the applications for the 2022 local sport infrastructure grants opened on the 19th of May and closed on the 12th of July, which allowed only 8 weeks for the same process that we normally allow 16 weeks, and we know when it's coming around. So it's a very short turnaround, but it's a real credit to our staff to be able to still identify 4 key priorities that range right across the Shire. And I really hope that that's a well-established track record with the state government now. So hopefully we have some success.
Councillor Goldsworthy.
These projects are really about getting our young people and others out and being active. And if they're successful, they'll do a great job at that. There's some really exciting projects in amongst them. I know particularly the pump tracks. I think people underestimate how many kids there are out there riding around on bikes and how much they enjoy getting out on facilities like this.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Croucher.
Yeah, I'd like to support the local sports infrastructure grant submission, in particular Tangambalanga, the active park there. The active park track addition will be really gratefully received with the rapid number of new houses, a lot of people in the area. The need for an active park in the estate is paramount, and this will be absolutely wonderful if it gets there. So are the others, but I'm just in particular the Tangam one. Thank you.
Councillor Horn.
It's really nice to see that the Waganya railway land development's starting to happen. They've been looking for something to go on that piece of land for a long time. And yes, it's good to see the smaller towns actually having some wonderful funding coming into their towns.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Just got a question for Councillor Croucher. What's the fastest growing area as far as population going in Indigo Shire?
I think it may be Tangambalanga.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.5. That Council considers the draft Rutherglen Destination Management Plan 2022 to 2027 and endorses it for a period of 30 days of public exhibition to allow the return of the plan to the August 22 council meeting for further consideration. So when it says public exhibition, people could make submissions. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Horn, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Horn.
There's a great deal of work that's gone into this, and it'll be interesting to see how the people of Rutherglen respond to it. There's lots of long-standing reports like the Game Changer tourism strategy from some time ago, 2018, etc., feeding into this. And yes, so it'll be interesting to see what the local people think about it and how it progresses our whole community.
Councillor Shepherd.
This is an amazing document. I've read it twice now, and it's very impressive in the way that it lays out the vision, the strategy, the action plan, and the fact that our tourism department and Susanna have worked with the winemakers of Rutherglen, Destination Rutherglen, Tourism Northeast, Main Street Traders, Lions Club, Arts Rutherglen, Waganya Progress Association, the Murray River Tourism, have all had input and feedback into this document. So when we're putting it out now, we know that there's a lot of ownership already in this document, and people are very keen to get on with it and make this happen. And I just love seeing the process that happened here with all the stakeholders engaged with a really obvious action plan and risks and a list of how we're going to measure this success. So, yeah, I'd just like to congratulate the Tourism Department on it and all those stakeholders in their input into this document. I look forward to seeing it implemented.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn?
Let's get on with it.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.6, the recommendation is the council endorses the process and the criteria to determine the next town for place planning. Somebody like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price.
Another thing that we've had great success with has been place planning or placemaking. We've run a number of these successfully, and we're able to build them into our strategic documents and be very successful with our grant funding. At the moment, we've got one happening in Rutherglen. I think we're getting really good at it now, and so it's really important that we really clearly define the process around how we decide which town should be next to have this process. It's very hotly contested. And so it's really important that we have an appropriate criteria and process around it. And I'm very confident in this.
Councillor Shepherd, no. Does anybody else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
The sense of ownership that was mentioned a short while ago is a really important aspect of all of these plans. It's very hard for people often to understand what they do want, often until they see what they don't want. So the importance of this sort of programming is, to get really dive down into what the people actually think and listen to what they're saying. It's exciting though.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.7, recommendation is that the council adopts the community grants guidelines for 2022-23. Councillor Croucher. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Goldsworthy. Councillor Croucher.
Having been a part of the community grants program, both on the panel as a councillor and being a community rep when I was not in council, I can see how important this form of funding is to our communities. I feel we have the process right now and agree to adopt the grants guidelines for 22-23.
Does anybody else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Price.
We've had a lot of discussion about our grants and the makeups of the committees and the guidelines, and I just think it's really important that we're transparent about all of those, and that's part of why they appear before councillors and part of why they appear in the agenda tonight.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.8, the Community Event Grants Program, guidelines for annual review 22-23. Recommendation, council adopt the Community Events Grants Guidelines. Appoints the external members of the Community Events Grants Assessment Panel consisting of one representative, each to be nominated by the following organisations: Murray Arts, Beechworth Health Service, Yakananda Health Service, Indigo North Health, and nominates a councillor to sit on the assessment panel. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Councillor Croucher, seconder. Councillor Price.
A bit short and sweet with this one. I have actually been the nominated councillor to sit on this panel with the Events Grants Program, and I think it works very, very well. And so with that remark, I'd like us to go forward with this recommendation.
Would you like to recommend yourself to sit on the assessment panel, or are we going to name the councillor tonight? I think we should.
Well, I'm not. I have done it before.
I can write down Councillor Croucher appoints Councillor.
No, I wasn't doing it because of that. But here we go.
Councillor Price, would you like to nominate?
How can you follow that, Councillor Price?
I'll nominate Councillor Croucher. Is that what I'm doing? Am I speaking as a seconder now? Just to also note that all of our grant programs that are offered are now consistently applied with our grants governance policy. So that's just for note by the community.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.9, Active Indigo Grants Program. Annual Review 22-23. Recommendation is the Council adopt the Active Indigo Grants Guidelines for 22-23. Appoints the external members of the Active Indigo Grants Assessment Panel consisting of one representative each to be nominated by the following organisations: Sports Northeast, Sport and Recreation Victoria, Beechworth Health Service, Yakandanda Health Service and Indigo North Health, and nominate a councillor to sit on the assessment panel. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Croucher. Councillor Price.
Am I able to nominate Councillor Croucher for that panel as well? Or was it Councillor?
No, yes, he might have. Yes, he was. Yes, yes.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yes, he was. Yes, he did.
So I'll nominate Councillor Tyson for the panel then.
Okay.
Again, this is another a very successful panel grant. Sorry, we were able to support our local communities, and we have great connection as it says in the recommendation with the likes of Sport Northeast, Sport and Rec Victoria, and our local health services, and they all help us to come to some really good decisions about some great things to support in our community.
Councillor Croucher.
Yeah, this to me was a new grants program. When I came back onto council, I didn't know much about this one, but I think it's a great program, and I applaud the opportunity now for communities to apply for the Active Indigo grants. And I'd also like to endorse the assessment panel and recommend that we adopt the Indigo grants guidelines for 22-23. I was on this panel the very first year, so I know I have been on it before. It's good.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 11.10, Tourism Events Grants Program. Recommendation is the council adopts the Tourism Events Grants Guidelines 2022-23, appoints external members of the Tourism Events Grants Assessment Panel consisting of one representative from Tourism Northeast and Murray Arts. Is that just a panel of two, CEO?
That's right. Yeah, plus internal staff, which separately All
right. Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Goldsworthy. Councillor Shepherd.
Yes, we've discussed this numerous years, really. Well, last year was our first year where we just had Tourism Northeast and Murray Arts give us their recommendation. We've discussed, should there be community members on there? Should there be representatives from tourism industry throughout the Shire? But there's always the discussion of there being a conflict of interest because, of course, they're all going to be applying for those funds. So it's very important for us to get a very transparent report back, seeing there's only internal people involved, even though they do a good job. It's for when we need to make the assessment, it's really good for us to be able to have why they chose certain people, why they didn't choose others. So it looks limited, but I think with the report that we get, we're able to make a good recommendation.
Councillor Goldsworthy. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Price.
I just wanted to reassure the community that we strike the right balance with this one as an example. Where we have previously participated in a committee, we know exactly, or a panel, we know exactly what the information that the committee receives, and we knew that it was enough information for them to really confidently make a decision. Now that we're further removed from that process, which we all have agreed is appropriate, we still make sure that we see all of that information to have the same level of confidence that the people that are on that panel have all the information that they need to make the right decisions.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.1, Community Sustainability Grant Program Guidelines Annual Review 22-23. Recommendation is that Council adopts the guidelines for the Community Sustainability Grants Program for 22-23 and 2, delegates to the Indigo Environment Advisory Committee to nominate 2 representatives to be on the Community Sustainability Grants Assessment Panel. I take it, CEO, that you nominate staff members to go onto that panel?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. The applications usually have a technical nature, and we have staff that are skilled in the area to help us assess those and help with the scoring.
Do the staff have voting rights?
Well, the panel goes through each, in effect, yes, but the panel goes through each grant application and assesses the relative merits of each one and makes a recommendation at the end of it to council.
Would somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Goldsworthy.
This grant was initiated by council probably about 6 years ago, and it came out of an application from the Wagania Rec Reserve for solar power, and this was what came out of that. And I think it's supported some terrific sustainability programs thus far. And the Environmental Advisory Committee has some absolute experts on them, and I couldn't think of who better to help guide us in determining appropriate applications and who should be supported.
Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Croucher.
I just got a question that I would like to ask. It may sound different, but Part 2 says delegates to the Indigo Environment Advisory Committee to nominate 2 representatives to be on the Community Sustainable Grants Assessment Panel. We have 3 councillors on that panel, is that correct? No, not on the panel, but on the advisory committee.
Yes, on the
okay.
committee, yeah.
Is it possible that one of those could be nominated to be on it? No. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that, because it could be a possibility that one of you say, "Oh, councillor, you go on that panel."
I think the idea of having
I agree with you, but I just wondered if it
IEC
was a
is their
possibility.
expertise. I don't know we've got the expertise that they have.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with, but it is a possibility with 3 of them. Then, yeah, thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.2. The Rutherglen Heavy Vehicle Alternate Route. I don't intend reading out the entire recommendation. Or perhaps I should. The recommendation is the council recognises the broad community concerns in relation to heavy vehicles in Main Street, Rutherglen. 2 notes of work that the Department of Transport have done to date in exploring options and undertaking community engagement. 3 notes a summary of this work and the advice provided by the Department of Transport in the attached briefing paper. 4 supports the position that neither the Upriver Road, Gurumata Road route, nor the Douglas Street, Reed Street, Scott Street route are suitable to reroute heavy vehicles from the main street, and rejects both of these potential routes as options. 5 notes the safety improvements that could be achieved through traffic calming works and streetscape improvements in Main Street, Murray Valley Highway, including intersection improvements, improved pedestrian crossing points requiring the removal of some on-street parking, approximately 12 spaces, and road markings. 6 supports in principle the Murray Valley Highway Main Street option. And 7 notes that a further report will be presented to council for a final decision following the development of detailed concept designs and a further community engagement process to assess support for the Main Street option. Somebody like to move that recommendation?
Okay, I'm going to move that recommendation with an amendment. The amendment bit will be to change point 5 to read notes the safety improvements that could be achieved in Main Street brackets Murray Valley Highway, and remove point 6 and replace it with request Department of Transport to investigate a Main Street Murray Valley Highway option in consultation with the community of Rutherglen.
Could you just say that slowly for the minute taker?
I'll repeat it
for myself?
again.
No, just part 6.
Request Department of Transport to investigate a Main Street Murray Valley Highway option in consultation with the community of Rutherglen.
Seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price. That is now the motion.
Got it. First and foremost, I'd like to be really clear about exactly what has been brought to council. This is a proposal from Regional Roads Victoria that is presented to Indigo Shire Council. We've been asked to include it in our agenda to show that there is either the support from council or not. This should very clearly still be delineated that it is a Regional Roads Victoria process that they need to conduct. Hence the changes that I've requested to be made to this motion. We wanted to take out that we support any option in principle, and we want to broaden it out to a discussion about the Main Street option. We do that very deliberately because there's one thing that we all agree on in this room is that none of these proposals should be put to council until they have been consulted with the community of Rutherglen. With every proposal that we've had from Regional Roads Victoria, that has always been the beginning of our line of questioning with them. What consultation have you done with the community? Thus far, we haven't had any satisfactory outcomes, but some of us would suggest that there has never been a satisfactory proposal put forward yet. Maybe we're getting closer to that, or perhaps not, but we will continue to put pressure on Regional Roads Victoria to go back to the community of Rutherglen rather than come back to Indigo Shire to support a proposal. And I hope that's evident in the changes that we've made tonight, and I hope it gets the support of the councillors.
Councillor Shepherd.
This has been an interesting process, really, in that when Regional Roads Victoria brings us these plans, I'm always wondering why they're trying to convince us. It's not me they need to convince at this stage, it's the community. And so, again, they've asked us to endorse their plan without us knowing at all what the community thinks. And in the 3 days from Friday till today that this has been in the agenda, and this is the first time the Rutherglen community has seen this proposal, we've had 40 or more emails speaking against this motion, and I can understand why they're speaking against it, because they don't feel as though they've had an input into it. So it's been a fraught, this whole issue's been fraught now for the last, whatever it is, 60 years. And as Councillor Price says, perhaps we're getting closer to it when we talk about what we've got left is a Main Street option. But even so, the community needs to say what they want to happen in that Main Street. And I think they've got pretty strong views, and I look forward to them being consulted and having their concerns and input into what happens in their street. That's it.
Councillor Goldsworthy? No. Would then Councillor Horn?
This discussion is not about taking car parks out of Main Street Rutherglen. It's not about cars and it's not about trucks. And the issue is not contained within the town's boundaries. It is and always has been about the safety of the people of Rutherglen and the sustainability of its business community. The road through Rutherglen was designed for horses and carts, and yet the road network to the east now accommodates the world's 11th largest inland port, a BP fatigue management centre capable of catering for 45 B-double trucks, the state's largest livestock exchange, and access to a major railhead. The nearby towns of Barnawartha and Chiltern also endure heavy vehicle traffic, as a logic distribution centre is capable of servicing 75% of Australian road freight traffic within 24 hours. While the people of Rutherglen are to be commended for their unbelievable patience and persistence over the last 5 decades, their tolerance is running out. A community-led initiative called Reroute Rutherglen campaign developed a new concept to ease the traffic in Main Street by suggesting the creation of a heavy vehicle alternate route in the hope of avoiding a tragedy while waiting for the bypass to be built. Not only did they identify a possible solution, they also worked hard to draw the attention of the media, which in turn helped attract an election promise of $4 million of state and federal funding. That's pretty good for a town the size of Rutherglen with less than 2,000 people. And they need to be sure that their $4 million is being well spent to make their town safer. The pending introduction of overdimension and driverless vehicles heightens the potential for serious injury or worse. One only has to consider the consequences of a driver suffering a serious health issue or being momentarily distracted as they maneuver their way through our narrow roads. The authorities have a duty of care to us all. Any change of road usage must be assessed to include stringent occupational health and safety protections to meet both current and future requirements to ensure improved safety for everyone. The impact on truck drivers required to transfer stressful environments where there's no room for error must also be considered. After a 6-year wait and the sound rejection of the last RRV plan, the community is justified in feeling they have not been listened to. It's hard to understand why we have been denied safety mechanisms, such as a push-button pedestrian crossing, especially as we have flashing 70-kilometre signs only a few kilometres further up the Murray Valley Highway. Safety must trump considerations of the historic context of the town. Our one-dimensional speed humps, inadequate signage and road markings do nothing to improve safety for pedestrians or vehicles. In fact, there are fast food outlets with far better traffic management than us. Furthermore, I think it's outrageous that recent advice from RRV personnel that $100+ million slated in the Delivering the Goods report of 2018 for the Rutherglen heavy vehicle route was in fact our $4 million. Really? A $96 million mistake? I cannot support this recommendation as I believe RRV has failed to meet either their community expectations or its brief to improve safety and amenity in Main Street, Rutherglen. There would be a very different outcome if this was a private enterprise.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I'd just like to make a couple of comments before it goes for a vote. We've all received a large number of emails, most saying the same things about pedestrian lights, roundabouts, speed humps. None of this is new. All of this has been put to Regional Roads Victoria. It is their road. It is their street. It's not a street under the guidance or owned by Indigo Shire. It's their road. They have said that making it so difficult for trucks in Main Street, Rutherglen, to take them out of Main Street, where else do you want to put them? Do you want to put them in residential streets surrounding? Because if the trucks can't get up there, they'll go somewhere else. And I think the suggestions of a number of those people are quite dangerous, because where will those trucks go? It's been a long time, the first announced in 2016, but it was going on for another 10 years before that. It was spoken to, the Oricon report, all of those reports. Is anybody against the motion?
Could I sum up, please, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Again, I'd just like to reiterate to the Rutherglen community in particular, from my discussions with councillors, the original recommendation that would have appeared in this agenda, none of us would have voted for. We've been very consistent with our feedback to Regional Roads Victoria that to satisfy Indigo Shire Council of any given proposal, they would need to satisfy the community of Rutherglen. And that's what we'll continue to send them back to do time and time again. I agree with the Mayor. Lots of the feedback that we have received, lots of those ideas have already been canvassed, and some of them won't be able to be considered because of the road classification. But nevertheless, it's a different phase of discussion to be talking about retaining them in the main street and providing traffic calming measures and improving the safety through that option. And so good luck to the community, and please engage with this next stage of the process, even though we know it has been a long, long process.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.3, the Asset Plan 2022 adoption. The recommendation is the council adopts the Asset Plan 2022. Would somebody like to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy. Do you have someone second it? Councillor Price, Councillor Goldsworthy.
I believe this is a legislative requirement. We already have some good asset plans, and this is an overview of where we stand. I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Price. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.4, the May Capital Works Report. Recommendation is the council notes the May Capital Works Report and year-to-date progress in the delivery of the Capital Works program. Question from Councillor Goldsworthy.
Just with the Epic mountain bike track, where are things at in regards to the trailhead for both Beechworth and Yakandanda, and what process will be undertaken to determine the most appropriate location?
The Director, Infrastructure Services.
Yeah, look, thanks, Councillor. My understanding with both of the trailheads, the discussion at Yakandanda seems to have been that from the reference group that the Yakandanda Sports Park would make the most sense. So that's a thinking at this stage rather than a decision. At Beechworth, I understand there's a couple of schools of thought between the Beechworth Goods Shed and somewhere at Lake Samble. Just look, from the preliminary discussions, I think there's merit in each of the sites. Your question is around the process going forward to determine decisions. So there is a reference group that comprises of the different landowners, the mountain bike clubs, a few other people. I think the decision around the location for the trailheads, we haven't resolved exactly how we get to that decision. I think probably some of the people on the reference group, some of the landholders don't play as much role in that. So I think it's one that we need to understand what the I suppose what the particular needs are, exactly what a trailhead is, whether it needs investment of infrastructure and the like. And then, we need to hold some sort of a process. We engage, the right stakeholders, and to some extent that will include community. I can't define more specifically at the moment because, I think there's a couple of questions we've got to answer before we determine the exact methodology. But that's the current thinking, and there's certainly a will to engage as required to land on the right outcomes for those decisions.
Thank you for the reply. I'm happy to move the motion in regards that we note the May Capital Works Report.
Well, in the absence of the Mayor, could we have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Di. Thank you. Over to you, Larry.
Only to reiterate, as spoken previously, about the completion rate, given the difficulties working under COVID, some of the weather and additional projects that have come on board. I think our staff are doing a very good job, and our completion rate is good, and hopefully next year will be great.
Yep, but I just wanted to reiterate, I'm very aware of Bell's Flat Road. Everything's had to be taken away from that project because of the wet weather. So not only is COVID and resources and all the other conditions that have been a problem for the infrastructure department, we've now got the wet weather that's really holding things up. So yeah, they're doing a great job under difficult situations. So thank you.
Councillor Croucher.
We can see throughout the Shire that the capital works delivery continues to progress well. The new multi-pavilion in Kiwa has begun, starting to move up. Another such projects mentioned in the report, despite the bad weather, are on track to be delivered in the near future. So that's really good news. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 12.5, proposed road deviation, Beechworth-Wodonga Road. Recommendation is the council endorses the proposed road deviation at 1678 Beechworth-Wodonga Road, Woorongee, as shown on the attached plan. 2 seeks consent of the Minister administering the Land Act 1958 for the deviation so that council can exercise its powers under the Local Government Act 1989, Schedule 10, Clause 2, power to deviate roads. And 3, authorises officers to proceed with the execution of the road deviation, including the publishing of a notice describing the deviation in the Government Gazette. Would somebody like to move that? Moved by Councillor Croucher, second by Councillor Price. Councillor Goldsworthy.
This is really needed to support the completion of the rail trail just near the Yakandanda roundabout. So it's important that it goes through and that the money that was spent earlier to have an underpass near that roundabout is put to good use so that people can use it.
Councillor Price.
Just to note that the deviation has been agreed to by the landowner and given in principle support from DELP. A public notice was placed on the 21st of May until 17 June, inviting submissions. No submissions received.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
This is more general, but just to thank all the landholders along the rail trail for being so accommodating. I know there's been a lot of work between Penny, the project manager, and all those landholders, and it's all been very amicable. So I think the Indigo Shire and tourists should very much thank those landholders all along that trail who've been so accommodating.
Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.1. Interesting one, the revocation of redundant policies. The recommendation is the council revokes the following policies: contributory schemes for local roads, footpaths and drainage policy, councillor discretionary fund policy, Indigo Shire Council community loans policy, interim car parking policy, plant equipment and fleet management policy, land sale or exchange pricing policy, recreational vehicle policy, rural road infrastructure contribution policy. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Price.
It's important that with all the different policies that we have, that they remain current, that they're reviewed, and that we have really clear line of sight of all of the ones that exist. As part of that, the governance team has done a review of the policy management process at council, and they've identified areas for improvement and also identified policies that are no longer required. It's all of those policies that are listed have been interrogated to see why they're no longer required, whether there's a more up-to-date process or another process that has sort of superseded them. And I'm quite satisfied with this list.
Councillor Shepherd.
Yes, for a number of years, we've been asking for the policies to be reviewed and for us to have oversight as to what ones are coming up and what needs to be approved. And I'd like to thank the governance team for getting that job done. And here's some of the list of some of the ones that just aren't relevant anymore. So we're much more aware now of our policies, when they're due, what date we have to review them. So thank you for that.
Would anybody else? Councillor Goldsworthy?
There's an old Chinese proverb that says, never pull down a fence unless you know why it was built. I'm concerned about our contributory scheme for the local roads, footpaths and drainage and the rural road infrastructure contribution policy. I'm just keen to know that there is a process in place where those things can still occur, where a private landholder can ask for something to be done, like a road to be asphalted, and there's a policy behind it where council says, yep, we'll go your halves or quarters or whatever it might be. And so I hope with some reassurance from the CEO that there's still something in place somewhere.
I'm going to throw to Jay. You're speaking there, Jay. Some of these I'm quite familiar with, but there's one or two there that were very old and not being used any longer. And I think I'll ask Jane to describe why the fence was there in the first place, if she knows, just off the cuff.
I'm going to disappoint you somewhat. We've taken advice from the directors and managers of who own the policies, and we've been assured that the road management plans, the asset plans and current internal practices are adequate for managing those activities.
So I guess we could, after the fact, come back to you, or if you wanted to vote against it, or if it didn't get up tonight, we could bring it back with more explanation on some of those, but that's up to yourself, Mr. Councillor Goldsworthy.
All I'd say, if there's not a current process or policy to deal with it, I would like one, but I'm happy to vote for the motion as it stands.
There's a couple of questions that I wouldn't mind asking. I think it'd be a good idea to bring it back.
So
I move a motion to defer this item for 2 council meetings. Is that sufficient time, CEO? All right. Until
Do we have a seconder?
this recommendation.
Just a recommendation.
Oh, okay.
So I guess you're flagging an alternate motion, Councillor Goldsworthy, because there's already a motion before the books.
Sure.
Up to Councillor Price. You happy to have it deferred? Or do you want to debate it now?
I'm happy to have it deferred.
Councillor Shepherd?
I'm happy to have
Yeah,
it deferred.
The mover and seconder agree. So it's moved by Councillor Goldsworthy. That's it. 2 months.
Got a vote on it?
Oh, yeah. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
So who seconded that? I missed that one. Who seconded that?
Yeah, you've got moving an amendment. You've got the 2 agreeing.
I'll second that.
Okay,
Yeah,
right. Gotcha.
I hate to say it, but seeing you move the first, your second doesn't matter. 13.2.
I changed my mind.
Yeah, governance rules might start chasing you. 13.2, Instrument Appointment of Authorization, Planning and Environment Act. The recommendation is in the exercise of the powers conferred, Section 224 of the Local Government Act, other legislation referred to in the touched instruments of appointment and authorisation, Indigo Shire Council resolves that the member of council staff referred to in attachment 1 be appointed and authorised as set out in the instrument. The instrument in attachment 1 comes into force immediately upon resolution of council and is revoked on the date the officer ceases employment by council or until council determines to vary or revoke it. I would like to move that. Moved by Councillor Goldsworthy, second by Councillor Croucher. You had your hand up.
I think you just bought a house.
Councillor Goldsworthy.
No, look, we need planners and we need them to be able to do their job.
Councillor Croucher.
I'll just endorse, Councillor.
Is anybody against the motion? Carried. 13.3, the recommendation is that council adopts the privacy policy 2022 review. Moved by councillor Croucher, seconded by councillor Horn. Councillor Croucher.
I just think that it's pretty important that people's information is managed appropriately, and that this provides the reassurance to our communities that we've got such a policy to have.
Councillor Horn. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. 13.4 is for information only about a contract awarded by the CEO for Lima South Quarries, wet mixed crushed rock, for information only. Item 13.5 for decision. Council receives the attached unconfirmed advisory committee minutes. Notes the following recommendation from Indigo, and that action is completed, to accept the 4-year plan and strategic action plan as working documents to be presented at the council briefing meeting May 2022. Notes the following recommendations from the Finance Committee, and that action is completed, that council accepts the Q3 year-to-date March 2022 financial report, that council accepts the year-to-date April financial report, noting the progress against council's Q2 forecast, and see the council endorses the attached budget for public exhibition and submissions. Somebody like to move that recommendation? Moved by councillor Shepherd, seconded by councillor Horn. Councillor Shepherd.
This report just provides the minutes and recommendations and officer comments from our advisory committees for public note and our note.
Does anybody else want to speak to the motion? Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 13.6 for decision. Recommends the council accepts the attached informal meetings of council records. Moved by councillor Price, seconded by councillor Croucher. Councillor Price. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. Item 14.1. I'll have to, at this stage, must physically vacate the chair.
Okay, thank you very much. 14.1, 14.1 council briefing meeting. Take notice that at a meeting of council meeting to be held on the 28th of June 2022, I intend to move the following motion. That 1, all councillor briefing meetings of the Indigo Shire Council.
Acting Chair, the motion's mine. I'm prepared to read.
Okay, over to you then.
Right, the motion is all councillor briefing meetings of the Indigo Shire Council will be open to all members of the public. 2, all councillor briefing meetings of the Indigo Shire Council will be live streamed via the council website. 3, except for matters deemed confidential under the Local Government Act 2020 and matters as included in the Indigo Shire Council privacy policy. Item 4 is out and replaced with this policy will reflect the opening of briefing meetings of the Indigo City Council. Indigo Shire Council has a briefing meeting every Tuesday. Everything that takes place at these meetings is confidential.
Just before you, can we have a seconder first, and then we'll ask you to speak on the motion? Is that correct? Is that the
Has that motion changed than what's in front of us?
Yep.
Number 4 has changed.
Number 4 was that this process will not commence prior to the council meeting of June 2022.
Well, that's taken out.
This is now June 2022, yes. That this motion reflect the opening of briefing meetings that are held by the Albury City Council? That's the motion.
Oh, but yeah, that's different to what you said before.
What did I say?
You didn't mention Albury City Council.
Oh, meant Albury City Council. Albury City Council. Yeah, I just wrote it there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reflect the policy. Reflect the, yeah.
So have we got that, or where do we go, Joe? Could you read it, that particularly part 4?
Mr. Chair, I've recorded this policy will reflect the opening of briefing meetings of the Albury City Council.
Thank
Are
you.
you happy with that one?
Yes.
Now, could we have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Horn. Now, would you like to speak on the motion now?
Thank you, Chair.
Do we do against? I'm not sure the process.
I'm speaking to the motion.
I would just allow him to speak to his motion first. I think that's etiquette. That's okay. And then we'll talk motion. Speak to your motion.
Indigo Shire Council has a briefing meeting every Tuesday. Everything that takes place at these meetings is confidential. Councils are not to discuss with their communities any matter that is spoken about at these meetings. There is no transparency or accountability. The secrecy of these meetings is not good governance. A number of items discussed become listed on the agenda for council meetings. These discussions should take place in the council meeting where councillors and council staff are accountable. Questions asked at the briefing meeting should be asked and answered in a public forum. Albury City Council have had this process in place since 2015. It has been successful.
Thank you. Now, could we ask the seconder, please? Reserve your right.
I reserve my right.
Okay. Anybody against the motion? Yes.
Yeah, so there's a number of questions I have for the mover, given the sparse details that are in the motion. What do you say constitutes a briefing meeting?
A briefing meeting is a meeting of councillors with council staff where you speak about policy or, as happened before this meeting, all of the agenda of the council meeting, and it was discussed last Tuesday, albeit that I wasn't present, but the Tuesday before the actual ordinary council agenda meeting is discussed with councillors and staff.
So as CEO,
I'm surprised you didn't know what a briefing meeting was.
So as CEO and councillor meetings, a briefing meeting?
Whether it's a briefing meeting, well, are they part of a briefing meeting?
That's what I'm
Are they
asking.
on the
That's what I'm
agenda?
asking you. You've listed down that all councillor briefing meetings. So I'm asking, do you intend that a CEO and councillor
I
meeting
just
is a
said
briefing meeting?
that briefing meetings are with councillors and council staff.
So it is a briefing meeting.
Yes.
Right. So when we spend a full day discussing the budget, is that a briefing meeting?
Well, I think it's described as a budget workshop in your calendar. It's not described as a briefing meeting. It was described as a budget workshop.
But we've, just by your definition, we've got councillors and staff, and we're talking about things that will come up later that'll be form part of council documents. So I just want to know, is it a briefing meeting?
Well, it wasn't described as a briefing meeting, and I'm describing here briefing meetings, and it was a workshop.
So working groups like the Caravan Park Strategy, the Rutherglen Placemaking, and Kiwa River Access, are they briefing meetings?
I would say so, yes.
Yeah. So we need to televise those. Yeah. What about planning site visits? Are they briefing meetings?
Planning site visits. All councillor briefing meetings. Well, they're not described as briefing meetings, they're site visits.
Right. So who gets to decide what's a briefing meeting and what's not, and what criteria do you use?
Well, councillor, you've been on council a long time, and I thought you would have known what a briefing meeting, but if you look at your calendar and it says site visit, it doesn't say briefing meeting.
Right?
Or
So-
if it says budget workshop, it doesn't say briefing meeting.
So if it doesn't say briefing meeting on the agenda, then it's not a briefing meeting. So if the CEO designated it as something else, then it wouldn't be a briefing meeting.
Well, there's informal meetings of councillors that are recorded, but the contents of those aren't recorded.
So are you saying that things like the Finance Committee, the Community Access Committee, the Environmental Advisory Committee, the Indigo Cultural Heritage and Advisory Committee and Indigo, which are all informal meetings of councillors, so do they get recorded?
Well, they're recorded in the minutes.
But do they get live streamed?
Well, I don't think the only live streaming room is this room, and they're certainly not held. I wouldn't describe them as briefing meetings. No, would you? Would you describe them as?
It's on my motion. That's what I'm trying to.
Yes, but I'm asking you a question.
Yep. So
would you describe them as briefing meetings?
Well, I'm trying to get out of
I'm
you
allowed
the
to ask
definition.
you.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to ask
All right,
you.
councillors, please. Have you any further questions,
Yeah,
councillor Goldsworthy?
So will there be any resource implications for the Shire in implementing this notice of motion?
Well, if it was live streamed, it would be.
Right, so will additional staff need to be employed to facilitate the live streaming of all these meetings?
Well, if it's happening during their daytime hours, I suppose it would be part of their duties. I'm not sure what you're getting at.
Well, will staff need additional training?
I don't think so.
I've got a question for the CEO.
Yep.
Will there be any resource implications for the Shire in implementing this notice of motion?
I presume that there would be some resource implications of it. There'd be more effort needed to set up, but basically the effort that goes into setting up a council meeting would be, which is not inconsiderable, would be the same as setting up for a briefing meeting. So there'd be more training of staff. Staff would need to be more involved with public speaking and things like that.
So how would a direction like this notice of motion affect the advice that council receives?
I guess there's two different levels of advice. I guess there's the I guess it's difficult to explain, but there's probably a more free-ranging discussion that's had off camera rather than on camera. Obviously, when meetings are held on camera, every word is heard and recorded and noted by the community, and I guess the discussion, as I am now, would have to be suited to a public transmission, which may be different to a free-flowing discussion when there is not a camera on. If I could just keep it as short as that.
Is it likely that the staff that we have formally received briefings from will need to change if their briefings are publicised, live streamed?
There is definitely a different set of skills in public speaking, and I suspect and I expect that there would be some staff who would be less inclined to feel comfortable. Some staff feel nervous coming before council or briefings at times, and they may well feel even less comfortable speaking in a public forum. Generally in a council meeting, the only staff that speak usually are the executive team. At a normal briefing, there are more staff that would attend in that more informal arrangement, and I expect that there would be less of those speaking to a publicly broadcast council briefing compared to behind closed doors, councillor briefing.
Councillor, I have to ask
got
you
one
if
last
you
question.
can just go one more
One
question.
last-
Thank you.
What are the possible legal ramifications of implementing this notice of motion?
I probably would need to give that more thought. Certainly, there's more. There's a higher risk to councillors of saying something in a libelous sense as possible. But I mean, or you've got that same risk in a council meeting, so you'd need to exercise that caution in a briefing that was broadcast. So I suppose there'd be there'd be risk to councillors in that more free-flowing discussion that they need to be careful about what they said. I'd probably need a bit more time to think about the legal implications. I would take that on notice.
If you were to defer to your risk advisor, governance and risk, would she know more?
Yeah, I had follow-up questions. I thought that Councillor Gold.
Yeah, look, I'd like to end that now. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
I've
Could I
got some clarification questions about.
I'll come back. Do the clarification. I'm asking for the people who are against the motion at the moment. That's all I was, and you're asking questions. So I'm going to ask.
I'd like some just clarification questions, not new questions. Just
well, can we do the who from the
CEO?
CEO. Okay, thank you.
Why would staff speak differently when they know they're being recorded to what they would if they're not recorded? That's a serious issue. If they know they're being recorded, you said that they would speak differently. Why would they speak differently?
I think it's just an observation that the conversation is more free-flowing in a briefing than it is in a council meeting forum, for example.
But why would they speak differently? Surely, if they're asked a question, they'd answer it differently if they knew the community were seeing what they were saying. I don't really understand that. And at a recently, when we were in Canberra last week, we spoke with the Mayor and CEO of Albury, and I asked them whether they had any difficulties at all with the community being present during briefing meetings, and they said no, it worked perfectly. It worked perfectly. I'm just responding to all of the questions.
You were asking for a clarification of the question, and I think the CEO has given you that. Have you another question to be clarified, Councillor?
Well, just that question that the CEO and the Mayor of Albury say that it works perfectly. I'm just wondering why their staff wouldn't speak differently to the cameras.
Okay, point taken.
Staff here would.
Point taken, Councillor. Now, can we have any comments from other members? Yes. Are you going to ask another question?
I see a question, yes. I'm just interested, if this had come up through our staff, I'd be able to have a whole lot of information about how this is going to affect the way we run things. But as it's coming from top down, I'm unsure. How have you spoken to the staff about how this will affect them? Do you know how this will affect them? Because at the moment, I won't speak to that. I'm just interested in, have you asked them, are we going to be aware of what their opinion is about this? Which is normally what we get with the briefing, their opinion.
I've had private conversations with them, and in particular the CEO, but because they're confidential, I won't be repeating them here. But just going on from what Councillor Goldsworthy said, I'm really surprised that the CEO said that some answers given to councillors asking questions by staff might be libelous. And surely,
can I just check? So you haven't asked,
if it's libelous,
you haven't checked with the staff how this. That's the question I'm asking. Have you checked with the?
Could you answer that it could be libelous?
Yeah, but could you answer the question that council was asking?
Yes, I just said.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's end it just there. Is anybody else would like to say anything?
Can I also ask? So you say in this statement, Albury City Council It has been very successful. Now, again, when I have a briefing come to me, I get normally from the staff a whole list of other opportunity where this has happened before, how often it happens, how it works, how successful it is. Just you saying it has been very successful. I'm just wondering what do you mean by that? How's it going to help me with my vote? It has been very successful.
Well, I've spoken to Councillor Thurley and said, how does the briefing meetings being open to the public, how has that affected council? He said it works perfectly. I spoke to Councillor Cameron and said, having open briefing meetings, has that had a bad effect on council? He said, no, it's had a very good effect on council. It works perfectly. I've spoken to the Mayor, Kylie King, works perfectly. I've spoken to the CEO. I don't know, Councillor, what you're afraid of.
No, I'm just saying I'm normally briefed before I make a decision. I feel very swinging in the wind with this type of motion where I can't feel what anyone else in the council feels about this. I haven't got a briefing paper. I'm not aware of what other councils do. I'm not aware of the effect. So I'm asking you to fill me in on that. And by having opinions from councillors from another council, I'm not sure that's enough. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Can we, Councillor
Well,
Price?
Was that a question?
No,
You've already
I-
answered.
I-
You've
I-
answered the question.
She's spoken
Yeah,
against the motion.
yeah.
isn't it interesting that we've got a 1,000-page agenda tonight with all of the detail that we request from our staff in order to be able to consider each of these agenda items, and then a notice of motion doesn't cover a page? To me, let's consider it on its merits. There's not even close to half of the detail there that should be if we were to genuinely consider this motion. I really reject the thought that you might be the champion for transparency by putting this motion up, because I hear from all the councillors in the room different ideas about how we should be taking information to the community earlier than we already do, and how we should be briefing the community or helping them to engage with the same material that we receive. We all understand exactly what our role is, and we're there representing those people, and it's better if they have the information that we have. A couple of examples of how we've done that in the time that I've been on council: our insistence on steering groups. Half the time the information that comes to us in these reports, more of the community has seen this information than councillors have, because we insist on it. Because if they come to us with this information, that's a much better process. The weekly update, that began as an email to councillors about the whole of the organisation, and it was a suggestion by a councillor that this information would be of great use to the public. So let's put it to the public. Sunset clauses on our confidential items. That was something that we insisted on, because anything that didn't need to remain in confidential, we agreed should have been made publicly available. So in terms of transparency, I think we're always heading in the right direction with that. And I'm always happy to hear how we can be more and more transparent. It's interesting when you read the Ombudsman's report into transparency, there's an item about notices of motion and just how they can work exactly against your transparency. Because if there's not enough information in them, then they actually work against the goal. Again, the items in the agenda tonight, we insist on pages upon pages with all of the detail. We ask that they consider social, environmental, legal implications. We ask them to detail the process that they've been through. None of that is here. There's nothing. I just am supposed to believe, because you've had a couple of conversations with councillors in Canberra a week ago, that it runs well enough, so we should adopt it. Even though in your own motion it's inconsistent, because you're saying all briefings when we've heard that Albury only does one a month. So you can't make head or tail of it. And for that reason, I just don't even think it should be considered. The last point I'd like to make is that it should never be insinuated that our staff would be scared to provide information in briefings, whether they were open or closed. To ignore the fact that there would absolutely be a different tone to meetings that are open or closed, and to ignore the fact that they have a different code of conduct that they have to abide by than we do as councillors, and that they wouldn't understand the same implications that we have for live streaming is just to ignore the fact, basically.
Yeah, Tom. Okay, I think we've had enough discussion. Did you want to say something?
Peter, I haven't spoken to it yet.
Oh, you only asked questions, didn't you? Yeah, can you, okay. Okay, go off you go.
There is no definition of the term briefing meeting under the Local Government Act. What Councillor Gaffney calls a briefing meeting is what the Local Government Act refers to as an assembly of councillors. Our governance rules calls an informal meeting. Despite what is written in the explanatory comments, we don't meet in secret. We have agendas and we meet regularly. We have meeting procedures that govern how they are run and a code of conduct to ensure we treat each other fairly. The topics of the meetings are reported publicly in our monthly council meeting agendas. We have a transparency policy. There's a process to release confidential information once the requirement to keep the matter confidential is passed. We have a relatively low rate of confidential items on our monthly meeting agenda. We consult with our community on every strategy and plan. We inform our community every week via a bulletin, and we broadcast our monthly meetings. We work with our community. Many of our discussions are on strategies and plans that are drawn directly from the council plan. The majority of these need at least some finessing by councillors prior to being released for public input. Most of the meetings, there are matters that are either private or need to be confidential for legal or commercial in confidence reasons. Some are planning matters where we sit as a quasi-judicial authority and need to keep an open mind, be fully informed and apply the circumstances to the planning scheme without encumbrance prior to making decisions. This motion is disingenuous. What is proposed cannot be delivered in any substantive form. It will be costly and it will, and if successful, would lead to a poorer outcome for our community. For all the talk of transparency, there was no discussion prior to the notice of motion being submitted that this was an issue. There was no strategic planning, no councillor or staff input about how to get the best outcome. It is a populist motion using emotive explanations with no supportive facts and no real world sense of how it can be delivered. While I would appreciate the increased transparency of public seeing every meeting we have, such that some councillors might actually have to read the documents prior to attending the meetings, some might want to be careful what they wish for. We councillors are elected as representatives of the Indigo Shire. The community has shown faith in us to make decisions in their best interest, and to do this, it means sometimes those interests are best served by getting fearless advice in a confidential setting. This motion deserves to be defeated.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goldsworth. And to you, please, Councillor Shepherd.
I think these issues have been spoken very eloquently by the
Councillor Shepherd.
councillors.
She asked a question. She didn't
And
before.
She made statements.
And
she asked questions.
I will continue. Recently, we changed that our advisory committees were open meetings, and I was attending one particular one, and members of the public attended. Afterwards, some of their external people spoke to me and said, that did not work. I wasn't able to speak frankly about that issue because there were people that were not involved, didn't understand the circumstances, that were listening in, and I couldn't speak confidently about that in front of them. And it made me realise, I'm concerned now perhaps about the advisory committees, but it made me think about this in our particular aspect when we have briefing meetings. I don't want that to happen. I don't want that by having people sitting watching, it changes the conversation that happens and that we don't get to talk. And even as councillors, to be able to say, we don't understand that, please explain, this is, or this is difficult for us. I imagine people will be concerned about showing that in front of people. So the frank and fearless conversation that we have absolutely pushed for the last 5 years that I've been on council, we are pushing deeper and deeper, constantly saying we need more information, you need to tell us more about that. We ask awkward questions. I think we would have to change if we had open briefing meetings. I'm absolutely open to talking about what perhaps presentations could be open.
Sum up now, please.
Open to community being involved in. I think there's perhaps an opportunity for just to discuss that, but not at this level. It needs to come up from a council discussion with staff as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Horn, did you wish to make a comment before we ask for the Councillor Gaffney to sum up?
Yes, I would like to speak to it. The scope and complexity of our current council operations are such that it's unlikely previous councillors could have imagined our change functions. Further, I do not believe our core responsibility of roads, rates and rubbish is fully understood. It has not remained static, but in fact morphed into a $37.5 million organisation. The number of people who check out the Mayor and CEO's updates each Friday is rising. The 311 pre-budget survey responses and further 18 submissions to the budget are testimony to the interest that is being shown. As you know, this is a dramatic increase from the low figure of 3 or 4 as seen in previous years. Inclusion, consultation, and meaningful information used in our communications are a clear signal of our goal and our commitment to deliberative engagement. Councillor briefing sessions must be opened up. It is the next logical step in demonstrating to residents and ratepayers we are conforming to the legislative requirement. Albury City councillors have established that similar changes instigated 7 years ago have been successful. While the mechanism of how to implement this change is yet to be decided, we have the advantage of their experience to guide us. The acid test, the pub test, is to ask a simple question. In modern Australia, would a reasonable person find it acceptable for us to share information that guides the formulation of our decision-making processes? I believe the answer is a resounding yes, and that this frank and forthright sharing of relevant information can only improve understanding, build confidence in our leadership, and enhance our important role as the nearest level of government to the people. Encouraging participation will strengthen our ability to educate, advise, and advocate to our city-centric colleagues in both Spring Street and Canberra. Your support for this motion to open our briefing sessions to the public will also align with the survey results on all 3 prime issues highlighted in the recent Australian Community Media Survey, calling for climate change, which we've already got, political integrity and leadership. I don't think we should waste this opportunity to respect these wishes.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Councillor Gaffney, would you like to sum up, please?
Councillor Cratcher, I have a question.
Yes,
I would like to...
just to check. Is this permissible, a question at this time?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, go for it.
A question to our senior governance advisor. If a motion like this was to prevail, what direction does it give to you? What are the legal risks?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you for the question. It's a very broad question. The issues that I would be considering from a governance and risk point of view would be confidentiality and matters in the public interest. Under the Local Government Act, changes were brought in 2020 that made it an offence for council staff and councillors to recklessly or knowingly release confidential information. The risk assessment we would be doing would be around the free-flowing nature of briefings. And when we develop a council agenda, we're very careful about information that's going to be held in confidence, and we provide very thorough explanations to the public as to why that is. If you have a free-flowing conversation, we would all be very careful, thinking very carefully about whether we may stray into the area of releasing confidential information. Not only that, but information that is not in the public interest to release, and that may be for commercial, contractual, or other public welfare, any number of reasons. Those would be the risk things that I would be considering in that context.
Thank you, everybody, for your discussion. I'm going to ask Councillor Gaffney now to sum up, please.
Yeah, just on that question and the answer by the governance officer, my motion's very, very clear that matters deemed confidential under the Local Government Act 2020 and matters that are included in the Indigo Shire Council privacy policy are not open to the public. So why you'd be so concerned about confidentiality? Really, this motion is all about integrity. It's all about integrity. And what do we hear from the our local politician continuously is about integrity. When legislation goes before the state government, it doesn't go to a briefing meeting in confidential. It's out in the public arena, and members of the government speak to it and speak against it. They don't do it in secret. Why we would, if you look at the council meeting of the 29th of March, there'd been a briefing meeting that same day, there'd been a briefing meeting the week before, and one particular councillor asked question after question after question at those briefing meetings, but when it came to the council meeting, didn't ask one question, which makes you wonder why would they want to know in secret the answers to their questions, but they don't want their community to know. It just beggars belief. And for the CEO to say that comments made by staff could be libelous, I just find it hard to fathom. And why would they speak differently when they knew the community was seeing what they were saying, as compared to in briefing meetings? And all briefing meetings, what's said at briefing meetings, even if it's confidential or it's not confidential or it's privacy, there's a complete ban. We're banned from talking to our community about it. What's the point in asking a question during a briefing meeting, a question asked by a constituent who doesn't really want it mentioned during a council meeting? You can't tell a constituent what the answer was, because all conversations in briefing meetings are held in secret. It's, as the governance officer said, if you are told something in a briefing meeting, it's confidential and you cannot repeat it. All I ask for is open and transparency and integrity. I'm not surprised that a number of councillors don't want it, and I'm not surprised that staff aren't keen on it either. But if it doesn't get up, and it looks like it won't, well, so be it. But at least I can say I tried.
Thank you, Councillor Gaffney. Thank you. All right, now it's time to put the vote forward. Could we please have all those people in favour of the vote, please, of the motion? Councillor, excuse me, could we just have silence, please, while this is taking place? Sorry, no, is he allowed to speak? No, you please be quiet. Thank you. No, thank you very much. Thank you. Now, can we ask for the motion again? Could I please ask for the motion? Those in favour? Councillor Horn, Councillor Gaffney. Those against? Councillor Croucher, Councillor Goldsworthy, Councillor Shepherd and Councillor Price. Motion defeated. Thank you. Yes, council lost. Oh, I switched it off, sorry.
Yeah, Peter switched it off. Item 14.2, proposed relocation of heritage carriages. Councillor Horn.
Mayor Gaffney, I'd like to ask for an adjournment of this item, please, because we need to gather some more information.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Croucher. Councillor Horn.
Yes, we have a great deal more people that we need to speak to, such as the Historic Trust, etc. And I just think we need an opportunity, having such a large agenda this evening, to consider more facts before I represent it.
Councillor Croucher.
I still need to know a lot about this particular motion, and I would value a chance for us to have an open discussion sometime, maybe at a briefing or something about it, so that we can put it forward. Thank you.
Just a question for the mover. just a question for the mover. Just,
Is there discussion for a deferral
I want to
motion?
know how long it's going to be deferred for. The date, it needs to specify the date.
Could it return for the next meeting, please? The July meeting.
I'm happy with it.
All right. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? All right. I now put the motion. All those in favour? Against? All those in favour? Councillor Horn, Councillor Croucher, Councillor Gaffney. Those against? Councillor Price, Councillor Goldsworthy, Councillor Shepherd. I'll use my casting vote. Motion, sorry? Carried. Item 15.1 is the mayoral diary. Any questions? Item 16.1 is the decision register for information. Item 17, general business. Do we have any general business? No. Item 18, confidential business. The recommendation is that the council meeting be closed to the public in accordance with section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020. Would somebody like to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Price, seconded by Councillor Croucher. Is anybody against the motion? Carried. We are now moving into confidential, so this meeting is closed to the public. Live streaming to cease.
So now I'll step out for item 0.1. Just think we're outside from the.
Thank you. I'll just ask for it to be recorded in the minutes. I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance.